Shchenim, chapter 7, 1. When a person has a window in his wall and a caller comes and builds a courtyard next to it, the owner of the courtyard cannot tell the owner of the window, close the window so that you will not look at me. For the owner of the window must establish his right to maintain the window, even though it is a source of damage. If his caller desires to build a wall opposite his window to block the invasion of his privacy, he must leave a space of 4 cubits next to the window to avoid casting a shadow upon it. 2. If the window is positioned low in the wall, and the owner of the window may force the owner of the courtyard to build a wall 4 cubits away from the window and build it at least 4 cubits high, so the owner of the courtyard cannot look through the window and watch the owner of the window. 3. The following was applied when the window was positioned high on the wall and the owner of the courtyard built a wall below the window. If there was more than 4 cubits from the top of the wall to the window, the owner of the window may not prevent the owner of the courtyard from building a wall, even though he does not leave any space between his wall and the window in which the window is located. For the new wall is not casting a shadow over his window, nor does it invade the privacy of the owner of the window. If, however, there is less than 4 cubits between the top of the wall and the window, the owner of the window may force the owner of the wall either to lower the wall so that the owner of the courtyard will not be able to stand on the wall and look through the window, or he may force the owner of the courtyard to build his wall 4 cubits from the window and build it more than 4 cubits higher than the wall. In this way, will not cast a shadow. No, the owner of the courtyard will be able to look in and see him. 4. When the owner of the courtyard builds one wall next to the window, he must build the wall at least a handbreadth away from the window, and he must build the wall at least 4 cubits higher than the window, or make the wall narrow on top, so that he will not sit on it and look into the window and watch his neighbor. 5. When a person builds 2 walls, one on either side of a window, there must be at least 4 cubits between them, and the window must be situated at the center of these 4 cubits. The owner of the courtyard may not place chach over the space between the walls, unless he leaves a space of 4 cubits between the chach and the wall where the window is located, so that will not cast a shadow over it. Accordingly, if a person comes to open a window, whether a large window or a small window overlooking a courtyard belonging to a colleague, that colleague may prevent him from doing so, for he can then tell the owner of the window, "You will be invading my privacy by looking at me." Even if the window is located high on the inner wall, the owner of the courtyard may protest, saying, "You will climb up a ladder and look at me." 6. If a person has opened the window overlooking a courtyard belonging to a colleague, and the owner of the courtyard waived his right to protest or displayed his willingness to consent, for instance, he helped him in the window's construction or he knew about the source of damage and did not protest, the owner of the window must establish his right to the window. The owner of the courtyard cannot come at a later date and protest that he must close it. What are the laws that apply with regard to this window that was allowed to open? If it is large enough for a person to insert his head, or even less than 4 cubits high, even if it is not large enough for a person to insert his head into it, the owner of the court may not build a wall opposite or at its side unless he moves 4 cubits away, as explained in Halacha 7. If however the window was too small for the head of the person to be inserted, or was more than 4 cubits high, the owner of the court may build a wall opposite or at its sides. For I can claim, I allowed you to open the window only because it is small and high, but it was not my intent to give you the right that would require me to move my building away. When does the above apply? When the window was open to be used or to allow air to enter, however the window was open so that light could enter, even if it was very small or very high. Since the owner of the court did not protest at the time of its construction, the owner of the court of the window is granted a right to it. The owner of the court may not build the structure opposite it or at its side unless he moves 4 cubits away, so that he does not cast a shadow against it, for he has granted him the right to the light. Similarly, if a person had a window for which he established a right, and the owner of the court built opposite it or at its side without moving away, or he closed the window where the owner of the window did not protest, the owner of the window cannot come at a later time protesting and demanding the window be opened or the structure be moved. Since he remains sound, he waived his right to protest. A person will not remain sound while another person blocks his light unless he relinquishes his right. 8. When a person has windows on the low portion of his wall and the person who owns an adjoining property desires to erect a building that will block them, he is not permitted to do so, even if he proposes, "I will open my windows for you in this wall above these others." The owner of the window may prevent him from doing so, explaining, "When you open the windows, you will shake the foundation of the wall and ruin it." Even if the person who desires to build offers, "I will tear down your wall and rebuild it rebuild it for you with windows higher up, and I'll rent a home for you to live in until I build it." The owner of the home can still prevent him from him saying, "And I want the trouble to move from one place to another." Therefore, if there is no difficulty involved at all, and it is not necessary for him to leave his home, he cannot prevent him from performing this construction. We compel him to allow his friend to close the window below and open up a new window for him higher up, not to allow this to be following the traits of Sedem. Similarly, whenever there is a situation where one person will benefit and his colleague will not be losing or lacking anything, we compel that person to cooperate. 9. By contrast, the owner of the window desires to change the location of his window, whether to raise it or lower. The owner of the adjoining courtyard can prevent him from doing so, even if the window was large, and the owner says, "I will open only a small window in another place and close this one." Needless to say, he cannot make the window larger. 10. The following rule applies when two brothers divide a courtyard that they receive this inheritance on their own accord, evaluating the building and the trees in each other's portion, but failing to pay attention to the value of the open space. Thus, one received the garden of the courtyard and one received it, etc. If the brother received the garden in the courtyard desires to build a wall at the end of this portion in front of his brothers, etc., he may do so even though he casts a shadow over it. For when dividing the estate, he did not pay attention to the value of the open space. Chapter 8:1. When a person desires to build a projection for his property, regardless of its size, extending over the space above a court that belongs to his colleague, his colleague will prevent him from doing so, for he will invade his property by looking at him when he hangs his articles on a projection or uses it in any way. If he builds a projection and the owner of the courtyard did not protest immediately, the builder of the projection establishes his right to it. 2. If the projection was a handbreadth wide, the owner of the projection establishes his right to the empty space of the courtyard. If the owner of the courtyard desires to build under the projection, as a result nullifies its usefulness, the owner of the projection may prevent it from doing so. If the projection is not a square handbreadth, and the owner of the projection does not establish his right to the empty space of the courtyard, whenever the owner of the courtyard desires, he may build under the projection, and as a result nullify its usefulness. The owner of the projection may not prevent it from doing so. 3. When the projection was constructed was 1 handbreadth wide and extended out 4 handbreadths into the space of his colleague's courtyard, and the owner of the courtyard did not protest against it. The owner of the projection establishes the right to a space 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths. If the owner of the projection desires, he may widen the projection until it is 4 handbreadths by 4 handbreadths. The owner of the courtyard may not build anything that is in the space of the courtyard below the projection, unless it leaves the space of 10 handbreadths below the projection, so the owner of the projection may make use of it. 4. When a person sets a small ladder that is fewer than 4 rungs in a courtyard or a field belonging to a colleague next to his own wall, he does not establish a right to use his colleague's property in this manner. Whenever the owner of the courtyard desires, he may build next to the ladder and nullify its usefulness. If, by contrast, the ladder is large, possessing 4 rungs or more, the owner of the ladder establishes a right to maintain it. If the owner of the courtyard desires to build a structure that would nullify its usefulness, the owner of the ladder may prevent it from doing so unless he moves a sufficient distance away, for he granted him the right of constructing a large ladder. For this reason, if the owner of the roof comes to set a large ladder in an adjacent courtyard, the owner of the courtyard may protest and prevent it from doing so. So he does not establish this right. If, however, he sets up a small ladder, the owner of the courtyard may not prevent it from doing so. For you tell me you are losing nothing from this. Whenever you desire, you may move it away. 5. The following was applied when a person desires to extend the drain pipe from his roof over a courtyard belonging to a colleague so that water will flow into his colleague's property, or he made a gutter on his wall so that the water will drain off and descend to his colleague's property. The owner of the courtyard may prevent it from doing so. The owner of the courtyard does not protest. If the owner of the courtyard does not protest, the neighbor establishes his right to the drain pipe. If afterwards the owner of the pipe desires to close, the owner of the courtyard can prevent it from doing so. For just as the owner of the roof establishes his right to have his water flow into the courtyard belonging to his colleague, the owner of the courtyard establishes his right to have water from his colleague's roof flow into his garden. If the owner of the roof desired to move the drain pipe from one quarter of the roof to the other, and the drain pipe was long and desired to shorten it, the owner of the courtyard may not prevent him from doing so, for the right the established was merely the water flow into his property. Similarly, if the owner of the courtyard desires to build under the drain pipe, the owner of the projection may not prevent him from doing so, for a drain pipe is not made for use like a projection, so that it could be said the owner of the roof has established his right to the open space of the courtyard, for a drain pipe is made only for the purpose of letting water flow through it. 6. The following is the problem: a person caused water from his roof to descend onto the courtyard of his colleague and established his right to this privilege. If the water was dripping in several places and he desired to have it collect in one place and make a drain pipe, he may. Similarly, if the water would descend in one place and the owner of the roof wanted it to flow to several different places, he may. He may even build a slanted canopy on this roof so the water will flow speedily into the courtyard of his colleagues, for he has established his right to have water descend into the courtyard of his colleague. 7. When there is a wall between properties of room and Shimon of the share its ownership, that may both use one may hollow out space from one side and insert beams regardless of the size, and the other may hollow out space from the other side and insert his beams. If the wall belonged to Reuven alone, Shimon may not make use of it. If, however, Shimon will hollow out space in the wall and inserted one beam, Reuven remained sound and did not protest. He established his right to the place of that beam, even if his original beam was small and Shimon desired to change it and make a big and thick beam, he may. If the beam was part of a temporary sukkah, he does not establish the right to maintain it for 30 days. For will say, I did not waive my right to protect it, I merely allowed it because it was temporary. If the owner of the beam maintained the sukkah for 30 days, he established a right to it, for that is no longer considered temporary. Different rules apply if he constructed a sukkah for the holiday. Within all the 7 days of the holiday, he does not establish a right to maintain it. After the 7 days are completed, he does establish his right. If he joins the end of the beam to the wall with mortar, he establishes his right immediately, provided he brings proof that Reuven helped him with the construction or saw and did not protest. 8. If a person establishes a right to insert one beam into the wall, he does not have a right to insert a second beam. For the owner of the wall waives the right to protest with regard to only one beam. When does the above apply? When the person inserted the beam admitted the wall did not belong to him, the owner waived the right to protest with regard to the insertion of this beam. If whoever he claimed either part of this wall, since he made use of it for one beam, his word is accepted, he's allowed to insert all his beams. He takes it for his husband that he is a partner in the entire wall. 9. When one of the colleagues builds the wall without participation of the other, only he has the right to it. If beams belonging to Reuven were placed within the wall and there was also space hollowed out on Shimon's side for him to place his beams, Shimon has not established his right to it. Shimon may not insert his beam into the wall, nor may he claim that he's the partner in it, for he has no use of it. Reuven can refute Shimon's claim, stating before building the wall, I hollowed out these places on your side, so that they will be prepared for you. So when you'll purchase a share from me, or when you'll request me to waive my right to protest, allowing you to insert your beams, you'll be allowed to do so without hollowing out the wall, so that the wall will not be shaken when it is hollowed out. Okay. Chapter 9. 1. A person may not dig a cistern, a trench, or a storage vat next to a wall belonging to a colleague unless he distances himself at least 3 handbreadths from the wall. Nor may he extend the irrigation ditch to make a pool for soaking clothes to be laundered near a wall unless you make such a separation. You must seal the wall of the cistern, water reservoir, or irrigation ditch with cement on one side near his colleague, so the water does not seep through and damage his colleague's wall. 2. A separation of 3 handbreadths must be placed between all of the debris, tar, salt, lime, or flint stones in a wall belonging to one's colleague, or these substances must be coated with cement. Similarly, a separation of 3 handbreadths must be between a wall and plants, plowing, and a cesspool where urine is collected. 3. A mill must be placed at a distance from a colleague's wall. The lower millstone must be separated from the wall by at least 3 handbreadths, causing the upper millstone to be separated by 4 handbreadths. The millstone will not cause tremors to the wall, and so that its noise will not frighten the neighborhood. 4. An oven should be separated from a wall. Separation of 3 handbreadths should be made between the wall and its base, resulting in a distance of 4 handbreadths between the wall, and the portions of the wall will not become heated. 5. A separation of 4 cubits must be made between a wall belonging to a colleague and a stone used by a launderer to beat garments till they become white. For otherwise, when the launderer beats the garments with the stone, the water will spray outward and cause damage. 6. A person should not urinate next to a wall belonging to a colleague unless he distances himself 3 handbreadths from it. 1 is above apply. With regard to a brick wall, with regard to a stone wall, by contrast, he distances himself by only 1 handbreadth. If the stones are marble, one may urinate on the side of the wall without making any separation. 7. A ladder should be separated from a dovecote by at least 4 cubits, that when the ladder is placed down, a marten will not leap up and descend to the dovecote and eat doves. 8. One should not leave a space of 4 cubits between a wall and a drain pipe belonging to a colleague, so that the owner of the drain pipe can set up a ladder to fix his drain pipe. Since he establishes the right to the drain pipe, he is given this additional privilege. Now, a wall belonging to Reuven is joined to a wall belonging to Shimon in an L shape, and Reuven desires to build a second wall opposite Shimon's wall so that the 3 walls will appear as a base. Shimon can prevent him from doing so and require him to leave a space of 4 cubits between the walls, so that there will be a wide space between the walls where people can tread and strengthen the earth. When does he apply? With regard to the wall of a garden, or with regard to the wall of a city, the wall of a courtyard in a new city. In an older city, by contrast, it is unnecessary. One may build opposite the wall without making any separation. If the length of Shimon's wall, which Reuven was building, was less than 4 cubits, Reuven may build opposite without making any separation, even though this prevents people from walking. The rationale is that a wall that is less than 4 cubits long does not have to have the earth near it. Strengthening 10. Following supply: when a person comes to dig a cistern at the end of his field near the property boundary of a colleague. If the field belonging to a person's colleague is not appropriate to contain cisterns, the person may dig in the cistern next to the boundary. The colleague may not protest against him if the colleague changes his mind and decides to dig a cistern next to the cistern that was dug. Separate himself 3 handbreadths from the wall. The cisterns that will be 6 handbreadths between the cavities of the 2 cisterns. If the field belonging to the person's colleague is appropriate to contain cisterns, the person may not dig the cistern next to the boundary. Instead, he must distance himself 3 handbreadths from the boundary before digging. Similarly, when his colleague comes to dig a cistern, he must also make a separation, digging the cistern 3 handbreadths within his field. 11. The following is applied when the first story of a house and the second story belong to 2 separate individuals. The owner of the first house should not build an oven in the first story of his house unless he leaves a space of 4 cubits above it. The owner of the second story may not build an oven until there is a ceiling 3 handbreadths thick below it. For a range, 1 handbreadth is sufficient. If he desires to build a baker's oven, there must be a ceiling of 4 handbreadths thick below it. For a range belonging to a baker, 3 handbreadths is required. Even if the person took the necessary precautions to separate the required distance, if fire emanated from the oven and caused damage, he must pay the damage as was explained in the source dealing with the subject. 12. In the following supply: when a person owns a store belonging to a person owns a store below a storage warehouse belonging to a colleague. In the store, you should not make a bakery, a paint factory, or a barn for cattle, nor should he bring in hay or other substances that will generate warm earth. This will damage the produce stored in the warehouse. For this reason, if the warehouse was used to store wine or so that it's not ruled by the heat, the owner may perform any task involving fire that he desires. You should not, however, make it a barn for cattle, for this will spoil the aroma of the wine. If the store has already been established as a barn or bakery, the like, and afterwards the second store desired to make his loft a warehouse for produce, but it's not protest because the store's owner continue to use the premises for the original purpose. Certainly, if the owner of the second story swept out his premises, sprinkled water on the floor, made many windows so that he could use the premises as a warehouse, and the owner of the lower story rushed and began building an oven before his colleague brought in produce to the warehouse, the owner of the second story began to store sesame seeds, pomegranate states, and the like. The owner of the lower story rushed and began to building an oven before his colleague brought in wheat to the warehouse. Or the owner of the store built a loft on top of his store to separate between the store and the warehouse. The owner of the warehouse prevented taking these actions. If, however, the owner of the store transgressed and built an oven like, the owner of the warehouse does not have the power to force him to remove the oven in all these situations.